Russell, could you help us with maybe giving us some historical perspective?
Yeah, like I said, as an Asian American studies professor, I sort of suspected that this was going to happen. In the 19th century, there was this yellow peril stereotype that the West would be invaded by the East, and the East would dominate the West with its invading hordes of people. That was the peril, and that they would invade, especially with their diseases. And in the 19th century, there were, when there was a smallpox epidemic, again, Chinese were blamed and scapegoated. There were three main diseases: leprosy, malaria, and smallpox. And that was used as for the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. The fact that Chinese were disease-ridden, that they were pagan, and that they were taking away jobs, those were all the rationale to exclude Chinese, to legislate discrimination, and also to attack Chinese. So 300 Chinese elements, including my family village in Monterey, they were pushed out, right? So disease, policy, and interpersonal attacks go together. That occurred again in 1900 when the bubonic plague came to the US. In Honolulu, Chinatown, they actually burned down the entire Chinatown and left 7,000 Chinese homeless. And of course, it was ironic because it spread the rats actually had the disease. In San Francisco, Chinatown quarantined the whole area. So there were Chinese residents there. Whites were allowed to leave, but the Chinese were quarantined and roped off with barbed wire to get sick. So this type of combination of using disease to develop a health that discriminated against Asians continued. In Angel Island, in the immigration center, Chinese had to go through health checks, right? And a common parasite, you could be detained longer, or you could actually be deported back. So throughout, at least Chinese American history, diseases have been used to scapegoat and target Chinese, and then either to exclude, quarantine, or detain us. So this is actually happening again. You know, now again, we're getting scapegoated for having this disease and bringing it to the US, and there's legislation. Trump just initiated an immigration ban. We're facing thousands of interpersonal attacks. So we see history repeating itself. The yellow peril fear has been resurrected. And like Joseph talked about, the neuroscience of it is that people see us as a threat and they make these automatic assumptions about us. They racially profile us, and we can talk about that later. And so I just see history repeating itself. You could also look at 9/11 as a textbook case that people who looked and were racialized, like South Asians or Arabs who weren't Muslim, they faced attack, and they also faced legislation. They were deported, they had to register. So I don't think it's unlikely that you'll see higher rates of deportation. You'll see racial profiling of Chinese scientists as this becomes a presidential campaign issue. And you'll see even detentions of Asians. So history has a lot to teach us, but history also shows us how Asians have resisted in the past. And we can talk about that later, but whenever Asians have faced this type of discrimination and racism, we've always resisted, and we've actually had some pretty powerful movements. And I hope this is another moment where we could rise up.